means creating a more inclusive curriculum, taking into consideration all ethnicities, not just focusing on the Eurocentric curriculum that we have in the education system at this current present moment in time?
I think it's really about reshaping and restructuring the education system so that perspective and experiences of everyone, not just the majority, is reflected. And I think it's really important that it's reflected in not just the curriculum, but in terms of staff, in terms of the reading list. Like, I think there's so many aspects of decolonising and the education. But yeah, I think it's just to make sure that everyone is reflected and everyone feels like they can see themselves in what they're learning.
Decolonising education means being aware of how knowledge is produced or constructed, so the fact that it's constructed in particular historical and geographical contexts and within a sort of particular power dynamic, I suppose.
It means we have to include everybody. I see it more widely. I just don't see it as some pertaining to races. I think decolonising is a movement that makes everybody feel included, people from a protected characteristic.
So when I think about decolonisation, I suppose it means for me finding out what I don't know, what I'm missing. I'm very conscious that the subjects I teach have been developed in a very Eurocentric Western way. And so decolonising it for me means bringing in different voices, different ideas, reimagining what my subject might look like if you decolonised it.
To me, decolonising education means exposing students to different perspectives, especially perspectives in the global south, and kind of introducing them the ideas of empire and imperialism and how it continues to shape the world we have today.
To me, it's about identifying how colonialism has changed our perceptions of learning and how we learn those kind of systems of learning. And it's going beyond that Eurocentric perspective, and it's embracing those different types of learning systems.
Well, I grew up in a colony, born in Hong Kong, so it's actually very interesting for me to talk about decolonising the education. I also particularly find it important to explain it from different person's perspective, because we have members at the university who came from colonialised background, also members from university who do not come from colonialised background. So when we talk about it, it's really about how we unpick the concept of it to reflect with different lived experience, and at the same time emphasizing the core message about it is to having different voices from different people into our education and discussion.
我觉得去殖民化教育指的是批判性的反思教育在被殖民所带来的影响，受到的一些影响，那么怎么去减少这些影响，然后带来更多的包容性和多样性。
I think it's really important for the University of Birmingham for various reasons. Okay? One, because where it's located. Look at the population around us. So diverse, so multicultural. Variations in race, culture, economic status. Everything is different, so why not? It's really important. Number two, history of Birmingham itself and the people who are behind the university. It's got colonial history. We need to acknowledge that, don't we? We need to say, this is what our roots are. We're moving forward. And therefore, it's really important for such a massive red brick university to be very active in decolonising the curriculum.
So I think if we look at the university as a whole, one thing that should and could be done is looking at its history of Joseph Chamberlain and accounting for that and understanding his role in this colonial ideology. And I think that's a kind of an act of transparency that the university should do to make clear if it's true in its commitment to decolonise.
Decolonising education is hugely important for University of Birmingham. It's working very hard to try and be more progressive with how it approaches the curriculum, how diverse the topics are, and I also think it's going to be an ongoing initiative, but I think it needs to continue to carry on to challenge not just what we're teaching, but the way in which we're teaching as well.
I feel like when I'm walking through campus, I can see it is on the University of Birmingham agenda, as there is a range of diversity on campus. When I'm walking around, I see loads of different ethnicities, I see loads of different cultures. So I see that University of Birmingham is doing something about this. In regards to decolonising efforts, I do see different societies holding different events, which is open for all people, not just that particular group. So I think that's one way that there's definitely efforts in making this change.
I suspect that across the university there is a lot of quite innovative work going on, but that it's probably in pockets, and that maybe it's not shared as widely as it could be.
I would say right now, if I had to think who can I go to talk about issues of racism, discrimination, it would be my academic tutor, I guess. But he's also, with no disrespect, he's also a white man. So I feel like it's not something that I can really relate to. So maybe there is, maybe it's like well-being, but I don't think that's been very accessible to everyone. I don't think that's very known to everyone that there is someone to go to, because I personally wouldn't know where to start if I wanted to bring up that conversation.
No, I have to tell you, I have to be really honest. I teach physiotherapy students, and it's majority white female. We have a high entry criteria, which I'm really trying to see if we can lower it down to be and have more widening participation, to have more diversity within our groups. However, because of our high entry criteria, we get all students with A stars, mostly people from grammar schools. So my my classroom, it's either majority white, very few people from different cultures and backgrounds, but we have a huge international component, at least 25% of our, but I don't think that's diversity. Having 25 students from Hong Kong or China doesn't mean I'm improving the diversity in my group, because we bring them in, they're the international students, we benefit from them, but what about the local community? You know, what about the other people who live in and around Birmingham? Why are they not in my physiotherapy group?
I see the effort of trying to implement academics from different countries, academics from different cultures, different ethnicities, and also, you know, when you're doing your own research, you can choose whatever topic you want, you can choose whatever essay topic you want, and that gives you an opportunity to discover whatever country you want or whatever ethnicity you can. So you don't have to follow any kind of specific rules, and that gives you space. And also lecturers do support you in the way of trying to find different academics outside the UK.
I feel like there's a lot of independence in choosing assignments in the topics that we do. So I feel like I'm really open to choosing what I want to talk about, talking about my history, talking about my culture, and that's available for everyone.
Politics is a very Western-focused, Eurocentric degree. We always look at, let's say, NATO through the lens of European scholars, like mostly British, to be honest. But something that I've always thought about is, how would an African scholar look at that? How would an Asian scholar view NATO or the United Nations? So I feel like that's a big area of improvement, and that's something that only a change in staff could lead to. You know, yeah, diversifying the staff is something that definitely needs to be addressed.
So I teach on two modules that do have some diverse content with them, in terms of including perspectives or examples, you know, from the global south or from other parts of the world. We also, when we introduced the Year 3 module, Reclaiming Education, that I teach on, we did try and co-construct that with the students that year to some extent. So students were given options on what case studies they wanted us to include in the module. But I'm very aware that that's like 4 years ago now, so you know, it's probably time to try and update that.
I'm in my 3rd year and I do a joint honours. I'm in both the education and the social policy schools. And I'll say within the 3 years I've been here, I've probably been taught by only 2 people of colour throughout my whole time, which is not something I would say has affected me academically. It's not something I'm like, oh, that's such a shame, but like I do kind of, it's something that I've noticed.
Personally, and I know it's a bit of a cop-out, but time is a factor. So, you know, time to step back and really critically reflect on not just on the reading list and the curriculum content of the module, but also things like teaching pedagogical practice, the form of the assessment, that sort of thing.
Just being one module leader trying to change things, or a handful of people who are trying to look into their curriculum, I think that's a big barrier, big challenge.
I think in the UK at the moment, the political climate is such that initiatives to decolonise the curriculum have become very divisive. I mean, you see this across the West in general, really, when you look at the pushback on critical race theory and initiatives like that. So it can be a challenging environment to work in when you want to create more progressive change, you want to create racial equality, equality for all people, when there is such a kind of vested effort in denying the impact that colonial thought has had.
You can't talk about decolonizing anything without it being a political conversation. So I think that's, that has to be a factor, that there will be people who don't want to challenge their own understandings of things. So that's got to be, a main factor. But I think also we do have the challenge of it being a very large institution, even within the School of Education, we've got really different types of programs. We are quite an international, quite a diverse institution as well. So I think there's always going to be challenges around that. There's going to be challenges, with, for example, international students. There may be people coming from different cultures or countries that have different ideas about colonization and then decolonization. So I think there's a lot of change management, I'll say, that would need to happen in terms of like the people dynamics, but also it's about just managing change on a scale as large as the University of Birmingham is.
Well, what we are doing at Birmingham at the moment is to revisit the narrative of our founding Chancellor, Joseph Chamberlain. Many of you know Chamberlain was a key person to the establishment of the university, and he also was a mayor that provided a lot of outstanding work to improve the living quality of people in the city in the cross of the century in 1900. But what we also need to look into is to develop a more well-run narrative about Chamberlain history, including his national career as a colony secretary in the UK and beyond. So what we are doing here at the moment is to look into how we provide a storyline to describe the history of Chamberlain, and then let people to be more educated, informed, and individuals can form their opinions about this historical figure.
There's been some interesting efforts done by groups such as Black Voices and some other decolonizing student projects, where we've been openly discussing about decolonizing our curriculum and how we can present that to our academic department so they can move forward with those policies.
Just on the race side of it, I try to include papers, I try to put pictures of people, just not different races, even women. I'm surprised, I didn't realize these were women researchers who are contributing to major papers which I use for my teaching. So I looked for the pictures and I project them and I say, I'm working on decolonizing the curriculum. That's a small step I'm doing. But I also insist on talking to people from different races. I ask them questions or I meet them outside of the classroom. I send out inclusive emails saying this is this week, Race Equality Week, or this is the festival. Do you have any thoughts? Do you want me to say something to the school? So I'm trying in my own personal way to make everybody feel included and welcome.
We have created annual reports on the experiences of minority ethnic students in the School of Government, and they have produced a lot of different findings, and it allows us to create those meaningful conversations and kind of make those pathways into decolonising education, and it brings in the input of those students, which is so important.
So Anita's put together a really great resource, a canvas page and resource list. And in terms of understanding where you're coming from, quite often engaging with those kind of materials can be really helpful, I think.
Started a little project where we developed a framework, and I've been pushing it in the school to say, can you go through this checklist and see if you're doing anything to make your curriculum inclusive. Some people have taken it on board. Unless it's mandatory, things don't get actioned on, right? And obviously people are so busy and they have everything else on their plate, so this becomes a minor thing.
Well, I think we need to address systematic barriers to education. So as I was talking about before, socio-economic status of minority ethnics. I believe that we need to look at schools in those kind of areas, and there needs to be a dialogue between the uni and these schools in order to build that bridge between those students who maybe wouldn't get that opportunity otherwise without that kind of relationship.
Quality over quantity, and even just some things like changing certain language use or making things accessible in ways that it can be really simple and not time consuming can actually have a big impact and can kind of start to change that mindset in a way that will kind of snowball and continue.
So as someone who's studying education, we of course find ourselves learning about this. The lectures introduce these kind of topics. But I'm not sure if in other courses it's the same amount of awareness they bring. I would aim to introduce these topics in extracurricular activities or events on campus for other students as well who wouldn't usually talk about these in classes.
The university can have an open discussion between academics as well as students in a representative fashion in order to improve the diversity of the assessment styles, as well as engage a wider number of students when it comes to learning.
在未来如何实现，我觉得可以在引用一些其他国家可能非母语为英语的国家的人写的文献，这样可以更好地体现那些国家人的生活以及他们的经历。
And I think that bottom-up approaches are really good to start the conversation. I think ultimately, if we really want to decolonize the institution, it will need to be an institutional commitment to decolonizing. There are other institutions in the UK that have taken that approach, such as De Montfort University, and so I think we need both approaches, but I think ultimately what will make the most impact at the end of the day is that the institution and the people highest in the institution make a commitment to decolonizing education across the board.
If we really want an inclusive society, we need to challenge the assumptions that are laid out in colonisation and the laws and the ideas that flowed from it, and really kind of embed some of this critical thinking in higher education and more broadly in society.
It will be interesting and important for us to look into whether the curriculum and the diversity of our teaching community in our academia reflect the population of our students. In Birmingham, for example, 47% of our students from ethnic minority background. It really represents that we do have a very diverse and international student population. So the question for us here is whether our curriculum and the content reflect the lived experience of a student and how we can utilize the lived experience to enrich our curriculum and education, and also support our students to be more educated in that area into the future.
I think first and foremost, it's important to make sure the conversation keeps going. I feel like a project like this is amazing because it makes sure that this is just an ongoing thing. I think post George Floyd, there was a rise of, oh, let's decolonise it, let's make it better, and then that kind of went downhill. So I feel like first of all is to make sure that university continues to put efforts in, not just during Black History Month or during a random week when they feel like, yeah, let's do it. I feel like it has to be an ongoing conversation. And I feel like as well, just to kind of be mindful that there's always going to be more perspectives, and I feel like just incorporate that in every kind of week rather than just 1 week of content. So I think it's like kind of making it a part of our learning rather than just a section of it once a week or once a semester.